Welcome to today's episode of Between Neens and Deens. My name is Nina, and I'm joined by my best friend, partner, and baby daddy, Dayon.
And together, we're a couple of 20-something-year-olds just trying to navigate this whole first-time parenting thing.
So we're laying it all out there and talking about all the things you wish your parents told you about love, sex, and happiness. So we are 37 weeks pregnant, which Insane. Is crazy. Like, time flew so quickly, and I feel like since we've been social distancing, like, it's all been a blur.
Yeah.
And time has weirdly moved so slow and so fast at the same time. But today we're going to be talking all about our birth plan. Yes. I know you guys are eager to hear it, and we are having a home birth.
Yay.
So I know there's so many questions, and right out the gates, I want to tell you guys that we are in Canada, so take this with a grain of salt. If you're listening from anywhere else, you 110% should do your research based on where you live, because home birth, hospital birth, all of those things, just birth in general, looks very different in every place. And so it's important to know where you are geographically and like the kind of information you're absorbing.
100%. When we first found out we were pregnant, so many people asked us, what's our birth plan? And I'm just like, to give birth?
I didn't know. I didn't even know what a birth plan was, to be honest.
And then when we started like really looking into it, we didn't even know like home birth was on the table until our midwife actually suggested it.
I knew Mars Lovejoy, who I follow on Instagram, Kaylani. I know they have had home births. I've seen other people have home births on Instagram, but it felt so far away from me. Like, it was just like, oh, like, it has that stigma of being very, like, hippy-dippy and, like, you know, just not for you. Like, okay, but, like, not for me. And so that's kind of how I approached it. But I figured we would just have a hospital birth because, I don't know, everyone has birth in a hospital. And, like, my parents had me in a hospital. You
see it in movies all the time.
Yeah, it's, like, that's the standard way of giving birth. And so we really never considered it until we sat down with our midwife at one of our appointments, and she was like, okay, let's review all of your options, because we'll get into more kind of the difference between an OB and a midwife, but with the midwife, we felt like we had more options, and at no point did we feel that they were steering us one way or the other. It was more just their approach to birth and pregnancy is, here are all of your options, educate yourself on every possible thing that could happen that you can make a decision on, and then make a decision. And so, like, when they did ask us where we wanted to give birth, initially we told them hospital, and then they asked us if we'd considered home birth, and we said no. And then that's when they were like, okay, like, go home, do some research, watch some documentaries, and then we'll talk next time and see what you think. And it wasn't until we did that research on our own that we were like, oh, like, this is like a whole other world that we never even knew about.
Watching those documentaries were so helpful, and our next midwife appointment, we were so excited to be like, so I think we actually do want to do a home birth.
We were actually really excited about it.
Yeah, because it's like, I mean, what Nina said, as funny as you are, she's like, the hospital is close, but home is even closer.
Yeah, that's like when I realized, I was like, I was so set on having a hospital birth, because I was like, we just moved and we moved so close to a hospital, so this is absolutely perfect. And then I was like, wait, we could just stay home. So we'll get into all of that, but I guess first, to break it down, like, the choice between like a midwife and an OB, like how we made that decision and why we made that decision to get a midwife. That's like a decision we made really early on in our pregnancy. And when you do have a midwife, at least kind of the ones that we have here in Canada, there's like kind of a given of like what your birth will look like. And like some of those things are like delayed cord clamping, like where once we have the baby, then immediately he'll be like placed on my chest and we'll have like time
to bond.
Yeah, to bond and just have skin to skin. It's not something that you need to put in your birth plan because it's a given. But yeah, we like decided really early on that we wanted a midwife versus an OB, and I was gonna see both of them. I had appointments to see both, and I kind of just did some research on what was in our area, because for me it was going to be most convenient to find whatever was closest, and we are very close to a hospital. St. Paul's is literally like 6 blocks away.
Like a 4-minute drive.
Yeah, it's like so close. It's like really, really, really close.
It's right there, yeah. If you walk, it's like it's a 9-minute walk.
I also chose to have an appointment with an OB at the hospital, and I ended up seeing the midwife appointment first because it just kind of happens that way, where like they were able to see me a lot sooner than the OB was, and that's kind of standard throughout like your pregnancy too, is that you don't necessarily see them more often, but your appointments are longer. I had both appointments scheduled, and I ended up seeing the midwife first, and we loved the one that we saw. It was really close to our house.
They were all so nice.
They were so nice, and it just really felt right for us. And you can obviously do like a whole bunch of research about the differences between the two, but for us, the big thing was that midwives work in a team. So there's a team of like 3 or 4 midwives, and you meet all of them throughout the course of your pregnancy. And so when you do deliver, whoever is on call that day is the person that delivers your baby. And there's always 2 midwives. So like say if it's a team of 3 or 4, then 2 of those people will show up to your birth, and they will be the ones delivering it. Whereas with an OB, it's really unlikely that your doctor that you've been seeing the entire time throughout your pregnancy, that's really gotten to know you, is going to be the one delivering your baby, because it's whoever's on call at the hospital, which is like a whole lot of doctors. And so for me, like I really wanted to have somebody deliver my baby that I was very familiar with.
To me, it feels a lot more flexible with like what they can do. Also where you want to give birth. Those are other things. Like midwife kind of goes anywhere you need it.
And it's like really important to note also that like, obviously for any American listeners, this is probably going to look and sound a little bit different for you or anywhere else around the world. But in Canada, the midwives have hospital privileges. They have the same privileges and rights, and they can write you the same prescriptions and all of that medical stuff as a doctor as it pertains to pregnancy. So like I got a UTI and like I need to get antibiotics, and so like my midwives could write that prescription, and so they have those same rights, whereas like in other places in the world and in the States, it may or may not look like that.
Yeah. Also, another thing is that it is covered by MSP. So yeah, like it's either or. So it's like it's either you go with a midwife or an OB, but either one you do choose, it is covered by MSP.
Yeah. So that was the big. Yeah, that's like where I started. I was like, okay, what's covered? Because obviously we have free healthcare here, which is amazing, because this would have cost so much. Having a baby costs so much money if you're paying out of pocket, or I mean, obviously I am self-employed, so I don't really have insurance. Yeah, I don't have coverage. So all I have is MSP and like basic Canadian healthcare, and basic Canadian healthcare covers everything, which is amazing. Yeah. So yeah, when I did my research at the beginning, it was either, I actually originally wanted to have a midwife and an OB, because I kind of just wanted to have, you know, like why not have the best of both worlds, but you could only have one. They would only pay for one. And so that's also why I made the decision to see the midwife first. And that's why I was concerned that if I went to both appointments, then maybe one wouldn't get covered. And so I kind of like knew that I wanted to have a midwife. And so I wanted to test it out. If I didn't like it, then I would just go to my other appointment and eat that cost. But yeah, so in Canada, you can have either or, but you can't have both, unfortunately. Or you can, but you would have to pay for the other one.
Yeah, I don't see why you would need both anyways.
Yeah, it would be overkill for sure.
Yeah.
But I think I just was like, well, why not? Because it's like one's heavily like medicalized and one is more like
personal almost. Yeah.
It's like it's personal, but it also is kind of the way that we've been giving birth for so many years. And I think for me, I didn't really go into this being like super fearful or being like, oh my God, like this pregnancy or this birth is going to be like so traumatic and scary. And I didn't have a whole lot of those fears. I really didn't even go into it knowing whether or not I wanted to have an epidural. And a lot of people were asking me that kind of right out the gate, because I think a lot of people kind of have an idea of what it is that they want, but I had no idea. And so I had a friend that did give birth recently, and she told me about her experience, and she did have a hospital birth. She had an epidural, and for her it was amazing. Like she was like, I did have to get induced, and like the cramps after that and like the labor after that was really painful, but then once she got the epidural, it was amazing, and she loved it, and it was like so easy. And so I was like, oh, okay, like that sounds nice, you know, like you don't feel any pain, you're cruising. But I didn't know necessarily if I wanted to get induced, because I was like, that didn't sound pleasant from her experience. And also like I would rather have as little intervention as possible. We just assumed that we were going to have a hospital birth, and whenever people asked, that's what we told them. Probably get an epidural if I want to. Like I was just very easygoing about everything, and I was always like, yeah, the hospital is so close to our house, so why would we not do it there? Like it's so convenient. I think when we first went into our appointments with the midwife, like very early on in our pregnancy, like you want to talk about your birth plan and like, okay, so how does it look? Like how does it go? Like in a hospital or whatever. But they really like there's so much to talk about, so you really don't talk about it until you're kind of halfway through your pregnancy. And it wasn't until our midwives asked us in January, have you considered a home birth, because that is a viable option in Canada. And we were like, okay, we know literally nothing about this. Like I just didn't know what it would look like. I didn't know that they would come to our house. I didn't know like if they would have any equipment. And so essentially she gave us like a really brief rundown in that meeting, and we would have 2 midwives come to our house, and they would bring medical equipment with them. So it would have the same hospital equipment as if you were in a level 1 hospital, which would be like, if you guys are familiar with Haida, like a place like that, all of that equipment in a hospital there would be coming to our house. So it's not like you're having just like a non-technological birth, you know? Mm-hmm. And that's kind of what I had imagined at first. And that's kind of scary, because obviously there's a lot of technology that is needed when you are giving birth.
Or that you assume is needed.
Yeah, that you assume is needed. Because, I mean, to be fair, people have been giving birth for so long without this medical equipment. And that's another thing we learned about in our research, was just how medicalized pregnancy and birth had become in the last couple of decades, and how normal that is for us. But to be fair, like, I mean, birth is a very natural process, and there are just things that we didn't understand personally about birth.
My dad was born in a home.
Your dad was. He was born in a farm,
When we told my parents, and my dad was like, oh, I was born in a house.
Yeah, it's a lot more common in like Asia and Europe even now, and a lot more popular than it is in America. And I mean, Canada has higher rates, but
especially where my dad is from, like the nearest hospital is like a long drive away.
Yeah.
So when you're in labor, why even bother?
Yeah, but that's the thing. So, like, obviously the first thing that people think about when they think about birth is, like, the risks, and especially with home birth. And 110%, I hear you, because, I mean, obviously that's something that you have to consider when you're giving birth. And it's so unpredictable. Like, none of us know how it's going to go. But what we were told and what the research has shown, especially in Canada, is that when you are a low-risk pregnancy, having a home birth or a hospital birth is the same level of risk. Like, it exposes you to the same level of risk. And so for us, it being equal, that's what allowed us to make a decision of whether we wanted to one or the other. Obviously, if we were a higher risk pregnancy, or if our midwives advised us that, hey, like, you're probably going to encounter a lot less risk if you go to a hospital, that's what we would do. Yeah. But for us, just because we had that option to do either or, and like, you can't ever eliminate risk. Like, you can't say that you're gonna you can't say that you're gonna go to a hospital and not have risk in your pregnancy just because you have access to all that technology there. Like, you don't know that. And like, nobody can predict that. And so we just kind of made the best decision possible for us, and like what we felt most comfortable with, because that's what it came down to at the end of the day. Yeah. And that being said, like, it's a really easy transfer to a hospital should any risk or complication arise. Yeah. So I think, like, for us, like, all those factors, us living really close to a hospital, the fact that I am low risk, like, all of those things played into our decision. And so if you are pregnant, you're like in this decision-making process, like, talk to your doctor or your midwife, and they will be able to know best in your situation what your options are, and then from there do your research. And that's really important to know, because when you do look at the stats and articles, I've googled like risks of home births, and I've read everything that you could possibly read, and a lot of it is from the States, just because of the way that Google works. And so a lot of what you're reading is you do have to think about, like, okay, are these people giving birth at home, and are they low risk? Is it advised that they do give birth at home, or that like it's an equal risk if you go to the hospital or have birth at home? Because there's a whole lot of stigma about it in the States, and because of that, the infrastructure that allows a safe transition from a home birth to a hospital, if it's necessary, is really, really fragmented, and it's really disconnected. So,
like we saw in that documentary that was all about home births in America.
Yeah, so like basically in the States, because it's not as common and it's not regarded as like a really valid form of birth, then when you do have any kind of difficulty that comes up and you need to transfer to a hospital because there is a complication, then that transfer is really, really hard, because the doctors at the hospital don't see home birth as a valid form of birth. And so it's like, hey, why are you doing this? And usually it tends to be that more people are having home births if they, for whatever reason, can't afford the hospital, if they're using drugs, and so they can't go to the hospital, like things like that. And so there's a whole lot of stigma behind it, but that transfer makes it really dangerous. And I think a lot of the stats around the risks of it have to do with the fact there isn't an infrastructure in place. But the difference is in Canada, the midwives have hospital privileges. And so at the moment that I'm in labor, I would tell my midwives and they would tell the hospitals. The hospitals would all have my name on the list.
Little board.
Yeah, like on a board. And so if for any reason we do have to transfer to the hospital, they can immediately bring us in. And there's like, it's such an easy transfer.
Yeah.
And the midwife would still be the one that's delivering my baby, unless there's a huge complication and we need to bring in like a specialized like OB or something like that. They would still be the one delivering my baby. And so there isn't like that miscommunication. And I think like all of those things really do impact like the risks that you're taking on. I know there's a lot of Americans out there that do have home births. This isn't to say that it's like super risky and dangerous and you shouldn't do it, but that's something to consider if you are in the States. But in Canada, because they have hospital privileges, it makes it a lot safer.
Another thing that I feel might mess up the statistic is that some people would choose home birth in America because they just can't afford going to the hospital. And that's like regardless of whether it is a safe pregnancy or not, like a low risk pregnancy or not, they would still choose to do a home birth just because they can't afford the cost of actually going to the hospital. So that's where the statistic of a home birth being dangerous might change, because they weren't advised by anyone to do a home birth. They just, that's like their only option.
And then if you also, like if you don't have a registered midwife there, like if you're just doing a home birth with
a homegirl,
with just your homies and, you know, a support system, then that's going to obviously pose a lot more risks, because obviously with the type of home birth that we're doing, it isn't void of medical technology. Like we're going to have, like they're going to be bringing their medical technology with them into our space. And so, and
it's pretty advanced. We got to see it actually in one of we had a home birth seminar, and we actually got to see a lot of like the equipment that they bring and stuff. And it's
so like if the baby does need to be resuscitated and things like that, like they have that equipment. So I think like that's another thing that we were very shocked by when we like found out about home births, was that there actually is equipment that comes into your home. It's not just like we're doing an all natural, like old style, no technology kind of birth. Like it's not like that, at least our births. And so that made us feel a lot more comfortable as well, is that like it has the technology of a level 1 hospital.
Yeah, it just gave us some more peace of mind. And another thing too is because like we don't know how unbearable it is, so we do have like a safe word in place that if you really need like epidural or some kind of pain management, the transfer is 100% understandable.
It is a little bit different now because of the situation, obviously because of COVID and because of social distancing and things like that. I just had a midwife appointment like a week ago, and they were telling me that, I mean, obviously like home is kind of the ideal place to have a birth right now, and you do obviously just have to be very trusting of the people that are entering your home and your space. So we'll have the 2 midwives that come over, and we'll also have a doula, which we'll get into later, but you just have to trust that these people are health professionals, and that if they don't have any symptoms, that they would show up for our birth, and if they do have any symptoms, that they would stay away. And I mean, like I've gotten a lot of questions about how do you gauge that, you know, but it's the same thing as if you go to a hospital. You have to trust that your doctor and the nurses are going to stay home if they're not feeling sick, well. And so they did tell me that if we do have to transfer to the hospital, that the hospital is taking like a lot of precautions about, you know, sanitizing and like being very mindful of people that are pregnant and delivering at this time. But a really interesting thing that I did see on Instagram recently was that there is a hospital in Ontario that recently put out and said that if you're having birth in this hospital, you will get an epidural, because the goal is to speed up the process of birth so that there isn't a whole lot of people in labor at the same time, that you're just limiting the amount of people in the hospital, which I mean like makes sense, but at the same time it's like you should never ever have that choice made for you. And like I feel like even in this situation that's dire right now, like I hold that very sacred, where like it's your birth and you should be able to experience it however you want. Like if you do want an epidural, great, but if you don't, you shouldn't go to a hospital and be told if you don't have one, then we can't deliver your baby here, which is essentially what it was saying. And so every hospital is dealing with kind of this situation very differently right now. Even with the hospital that's closest to our house, St. Paul's, they only allow 1 support person. And so if we do end up having to go there for whatever reason, then Dayan would be the only person that would be able to be there with me. I wouldn't be able.
Me or the doula.
Yeah, it's either him or the doula. And obviously my midwives would still be there because I have to deliver the baby. But yeah, it's really him or my doula. Whereas BC Women's Hospital, you could have 2. And they do still like acknowledge doulas in like their role there. But I mean like that's just kind of very unfortunate. And so with having the home birth, we we're going to have our 2 midwives, our doula, Dayon, and then originally our friend was also going to be there because she was going to help us document it. And, like, I'm very close with her, so, like, I don't mind her being around me, like, naked and giving birth and stuff. But, yeah, she was going to help us document it. It just kind of sucks that, like, now we won't be able to have that. But at the end of the day, it's, like, the protocols are in place for safety reasons, so I get it. So going all the way back to when we made this decision, we ended up actually deciding for sure that we wanted to have a home birth back in January. So there are obviously a ton of reasons why we ended up going with a home birth, which are, like, to be fair, I don't blame you guys if you've never considered these things before, because we did not at all.
Yeah,
like, I was just like,
researched it.
Yeah, because I was like, a birth happens in a hospital. So anyways, one of the biggest reasons for us why we didn't want to give birth in a hospital, that I did kind of mention before with the Ontario hospital, was that there are less interventions.
Yeah, which is a big one. There are more interventions that tend to happen because you can't really be there for too long.
Well, because the thing is, like, at the end of the day, like, a hospital is a business now more than ever. Yeah. Because you're really, like, trying to pump people out, like, treat people and pump them out as soon as possible. And so every hospital is different. Like, I've talked to some women that have had, like, amazing hospital experiences where, like, they didn't feel rushed at all and, like, all these things. But from kind of the research that we gained was that at the end of the day, a hospital is a business. So if you're going in there, you need to be giving birth. Then it's like, okay, well, this birth is not progressing as we would like it to. But birth is
a natural thing.
It's natural thing that your body's going to do in its own time.
Yeah, because, I mean, it's been doing everything that it's supposed to be doing in 9 months.
Yeah,
so,
and there's no right way to give birth. There's no, it needs to happen in 12 hours. It needs to happen in 24 hours. You know, like, every person's labor is so different. And I think when we understood that and understood that your body knows what it wants to do and you need to just allow it to, that I didn't want to step into an environment where somebody was going to tell me your body isn't progressing the way we, like, they say the way it should, but what it really means is that the way that we want it to. And so, like, there's, like, this outdated chart that they essentially follow where it's like every hour it's supposed to be dilating a certain amount. And if you aren't dilating at that standard rate, then that means that you need to be induced because your body is progressing too slowly.
Yeah.
And so
the statistics show too, once you've been induced, that it usually, it's a domino effect. It kind of goes down the line of, then it ends up being
epidural and then potentially C-section. So, like,
yeah, which was one that we definitely wanted to avoid. I mean, of course, there's certain complications that you would need one regardless.
I just would prefer to give natural birth.
Yeah.
I don't want to be put in a situation where stress is already very high, and then, like, somebody's telling you, okay, we need to do this, and then we need to do this, and we need to do this, and not really being able to feel, like, empowered in my birth, and more like somebody's telling me that this isn't fitting our schedule and we need you to progress in this way. Obviously, all of this being said, like, there are cases where interventions need to happen. I'm not saying that I'm, like, resistant to all of it. At the end of the day, we just want a healthy baby. But if I can have a pleasant experience while I'm giving birth, then I would way prefer that than somebody telling me I need to have a C-section or a episiotomy that is unnecessary. And so, like,
that one, the episiotomy gets me too.
So it's just like,
for those that don't know what that is, they snip your vagina so that
there's more room.
So basically, because, like, they believe that it's gonna tear anyway, so they might as well cut it because then it becomes an easier stitch.
Yeah.
But then there's a lot of statistics and things that show, and, like, research that shows that it's not necessary.
Yeah.
That a lot of times women don't actually tear.
And then it's just, like, another thing that you have to heal in your recovery. And then also, like, they could potentially use, like, a vacuum. And, like, that's the thing, is that some of these things are necessary, but a lot of times when they're being used, it's not necessary, and it's just to speed up birth.
Yeah, I'm just throwing it out there, but to me, I feel like when they have those tools, they may want to just, like, use them because they have them there, even if they don't necessarily need to.
Well,
do you know what I mean?
But that's the thing, is that, like, you do have to think about the current climate that we're in as well. And, like, to be fair, like, you don't want to keep a pregnant person in the hospital longer than they have to be. And I think, like, that's another thing too, is that a lot of people end up going to the hospital when they first, like, feel labor hit. And that's, like, a misconception that, like, Hollywood teaches you, that, like, oh, your water breaks and immediately you're rushed in the hospital and it's, like, this crazy frantic thing. But really, in reality, birth is, it's like that first phase of labor when you feel those contractions. They're really sporadic. It might start and stop, and it might last a day. It might last 3 days, and that's normal, you know? But then for people that go into the hospital right when it starts and they're like, okay, check me in, then it's like, okay, like now you're here and you need to be giving birth if you're here. And so like
and
that's when all those things get sped up.
Yeah, a lot of times women get sent home too. When they first come and they're in labor, then they just get sent home, like, because they're like, oh yeah, it's just not progressing.
I mean, this is just all stuff that you learn as you research more about like birth and the process that your body takes. But that's just the first reason that was really big for us about wanting to have a home birth versus a hospital, was just trying to avoid unnecessary interventions.
And the next one that I found really interesting was about like how animals tend to go somewhere that's comfortable, dark. That's like where they tend to give birth.
Cool and dark and
like as comfortable as possible. And
that's where
safe,
they give birth.
Right?
Yeah, that's where they tend to go to when they give birth. And in a hospital, it's like bright lights and it's like
it doesn't
sterile.
feel like a comfortable environment. And there's like just so many unfamiliar faces, and
that is a huge one.
I'm sure there's a lot of ruckus around you. And
like I think for me, more than at first I was like, like the bright lights and like being able to control your environment I think is huge. And so like being able to be comfortable, move around freely. I think that a lot of women when they're in a hospital, like you're giving birth laying or like sitting down, whereas when you're in your home you're a lot more flexible with where you can give birth. You can be standing up, you can be sitting down.
It's literally whatever is the most comfortable for
it's
you.
whatever your body needs of you. And like that was really huge for me. But another thing is that I was reading in a book about natural birth that there's so many things that can happen within your body when you're giving birth that you don't even realize. But essentially in this book they were saying that when a woman is in the middle of giving birth and becomes uncomfortable, so say like a new face arises, or when like a new person enters the room that they're not familiar with, which was really big for me because I was like, I want everyone in the room, everyone at my birth to be someone I know and I'm familiar with. But when somebody enters your space that you're not familiar with, then it can actually reverse your dilation, or like you can honestly like suck your baby back in. Yeah, there have been so many stories about that. And so yeah, you guys should look it up. But essentially it's that like you being uncomfortable or not extremely comfortable with everything and everyone in your environment can delay or halt your birth. So yeah, for me it was just really huge to be able to control my environment in a way that I never even really considered to be important. But this being said, if you are going to be like the most comfortable in a hospital and you wouldn't be comfortable in your home, 110% go to a hospital and give birth. Because when you're most comfortable, that's when your body's going to be able to do its thing and like really be able to deliver this baby the way that it knows how. So yeah, like this whole podcast is not to convince anybody of like, yes, home birth is the option for everyone. Like it really is just the right option for us. And it really is just because it's like what makes us the most comfortable. Really me. It doesn't really matter what makes Daeyoung uncomfortable because he's not giving birth. Another reason that we wanted to have a home birth is because it doesn't rule out the option of being able to go to the hospital. And like Dan's mentioned this earlier, but essentially if I am laboring and we're all set up to do a home birth and everyone's here, we're monitoring my dilation and contractions and all of that stuff, and I decide like, okay, this is way too much, like I cannot handle this, like I need help, I need like pain meds, like whatever, like I would essentially need an epidural, then at that point we have a safe word, which is pineapples. And so like before that I would probably be like, oh my god, this is really painful, and everyone around me, their job is to kind of talk me off that ledge and be like, yeah, calm me down and be like, it's okay, like this is okay, like this is your body's process, and like, you know, be able to try and soothe me. But then you need to have a safe word, which I didn't even consider, but you need to have a safe word so that you can tell people, no, I've reached my limit, like you can stop trying to calm me down now because I'm done. And whenever I decide that I'm done and I say that, then that's when we would pack up and go to a hospital. And the hospital is literally like a 4 or 5 minute drive because it's 5 blocks away, 6 blocks away. And so like that transfer would be really smooth for us. And so for someone that's like living really far away from a hospital or things like that, that would make it a little bit harder to transfer. That's something to consider. But for us, like a transfer would be so easy that I'm like, okay, like if there are complications that arise, like we can get there ASAP.
Yeah.
And it like wouldn't be an issue.
We would just have to leave our doula behind.
Well, yeah, if we went to St. Paul's,
climate.
Yeah. So I know we've mentioned our doula a lot, and a doula is super optional. It's not covered by MSP. It was something that we decided to add on. And a doula is not just if you want to have a home birth. It's whether you want to have a home, hospital, whatever. It's just somebody that essentially assists you in birth.
Yeah.
And it's somebody
that's more focused on us.
Yeah, like she's not a medical professional, so it's like she doesn't like she's not like a doctor or a midwife or anything like that, but it is still a profession of somebody that specializes in birth. So essentially her job is to hold space for us to have this birth be whatever experience it is that we want it to be. And I think that was another thing that shifted too when we started thinking about kind of our home versus hospital birth, was that for me, like I really wanted this birth to be an experience and a moment for me and Dan to really bond, and like I want it to be really, really special. It wasn't something I wanted to rush. It wasn't something that was like scary to me. It was something I wanted to like treasure and weirdly enough like enjoy, you know, because it's a huge life experience.
Cherish.
Yeah, cherish. And so with the doula, their job is holding that space for us. So kind of coaching Dayon in like what it is that he needs to do to best support me, because neither of us have been through this, you know, like, and for me, I know that I'm going to get very frustrated, Dan, because I'm like, why is he doing things that are not helping me?
Story of my life.
Yeah, but it's like, that's the thing, is he already does that in regular life. So I know that when a birth happens, like he's going to start doing things that he thinks is helpful. And I'm like, what the fuck are you doing? And so like having someone be there that has experienced so many births and that kind of knows the best way to support a birthing person, then like she would be able to tell him what to do, and then she would be able to kind of take care of the other things that need to happen in order for us to just be in the moment.
Yeah.
And like that doesn't sound like a huge thing, but it really is. Like in the moment, like I want to be able to just be present and focus on what I need to do. I don't want to be focused on like all the other things that need to happen, like grabbing more towels or like making sure that we're fed, making sure that we're like napping properly, like all those things. Like we're not going to be able to know that because it's our first time giving birth. And having somebody that is specialized in that, that's essentially why we ended up getting a doula. And she's someone that we were friends with.
Yeah,
so,
that we knew from before.
Yeah, I got a lot of questions about how to find a doula, and I mean, if you don't know somebody specifically, then I would definitely just ask your doctor or midwife, because they will know. They will have worked with doulas in the past. So shout out Artie. Artie is our doula if you guys are in Vancouver. I mean, she hasn't assisted us in our birth yet, but we have obviously met with her, hired her already. Yeah. So we've talked to her, had a couple meetings about everything to anticipate. So Artie at Vama Wellness.
Vama Wellness, yeah. Another clutch thing is that with the doula fees comes a birthing pool.
The birthing pool, the tub.
Which sounds mad comfortable.
Yeah, it's like big enough for both me and Dan to be in it. I can deliver in there if I want to. I haven't really made up my mind about it, and I don't think that I really will, because at the end of the day, I have no idea what my birth is going to be like. I don't know if I'm going to love that tub so much and I'm like, this is where I want to be to give birth, or if I'm like, nah, okay, like I like laboring in here, but let's get out, let's move it to, I don't know, the floor or the bed. Like I don't know what my body is gonna want. I don't know how I'm gonna handle it. And so I feel like for me, what's best, and like when you talk to a lot of people, even like your midwife, what's best is that you do have an idea of what you want, but being very, very flexible and not beating yourself up if you do have to make other decisions that deviates from your plan should they come up. Because I think that when people start to feel that like guilt or feeling like their birth isn't what they wanted, it's because you had such a rigid plan, and at the end of the day, birth never happens the way that you kind of anticipate that it will. And so being able to be very like easygoing with like what ends up happening, I think is like the best approach. So I know that I want a home birth, and I know that I'm gonna have a tub, but past that, like I just want a healthy baby. So whatever happens, like it's gonna happen. I'm gonna be cool with it. Like there's
it's low-key like our vacations. If we plan it and it doesn't go according to plan, then you get upset. But when you go on vacation, you don't plan anything. Whatever happens, and it'll be a good time.
You just want to have a good time. That's it. That's it. So
trying to have the best time as possible. But yeah, another thing with the doula that I found helpful was that in a lot of the books that I read about being a partner is that we just need to be together as much as possible, and I shouldn't really be leaving your side. So that's where the doula comes into play, where she'll be able to assist us in any way that could keep us together as long as possible and have the experience be more focused on us. The midwives are more focused on the baby, making sure the delivery is all good.
And that's why there's two. There's one that like primarily is like looking after the baby, and one is primarily looking after me. So that's why there's two of them. And
then the doula is focused on us and our experience. So that's why we were like, because the doula is optional, but that's why we were like, no, we do want one, because it was a hard decision to make as well.
Because I mean, they aren't cheap.
It's not cheap.
Yeah, they're not cheap. But at the end of the day, I was like, we're only experiencing our first birth once, you know, and like I want it to be special. I want it to be something that we can look back on and like cherish. And I know that in a lot of the things that I've read and people that I've talked to, the way that your birth ends up going kind of does frame like the initial sentiments you feel like in the first couple weeks, months of your birth. And some people go through really traumatic births, and you know, obviously that's really out of your control, but that can really shape kind of how you approach the first couple months with your newborn. And so like I wanted to have an experience where like as much as possible I want it to be positive, and I want it to be like something that's, you know, like memorable for the both of us. And that's just gonna bring us closer.
And that's why we wanted to document it, but
yeah, we wanted to document it, but that's okay.
That's all right. With home birth, what we did find is that you can really control your whole environment, you know, like, you know, you can light some candles, you can play some music that's relaxing, you can kind of do anything, like
which is like really important, because like I think when I initially thought of birth, I was like, it's something that is gonna happen to me, and I'm just gonna be thrown into this environment and everyone's gonna be telling me how to give birth. But after researching more kind of about like birth in general, it's really something that, I mean, it is happening to you, but you have autonomy over your body and you have to give into it, you know, and you have to trust your body. And I want to be able to trust my body and not like trust somebody else that's telling me this is what needs to happen with your body. Yeah. And I think like that was really, really important for me.
Germs as well. Your baby is exposed to just the germs within your own home as opposed to the germs in the hospital that you can't really control.
I think that's a really big one. And especially now. I mean, I know that like obviously they're taking a lot of protocols and like things like that. And should we have to go to hospital, like it's not going to be like disgusting or anything like that. But like it is something to consider that like when you are in a different environment, you're exposed to other germs. And at home, you're exposed to your germs, which is what the baby's going to be growing up in anyways, so.
Another thing that I was like, when our midwife first mentioned it to me, I was so nervous, but then now I think I want to do it, is when she asked me, do I want to catch the baby?
Oh my god, yeah. Dan was like, I don't know, I don't think so. And I was like, what the hell? Like, why would you not want to do scary. That? Yeah, it is, but you would be the first person to touch our baby. Like, wouldn't you prefer that?
Blood makes me so, like, so weak.
Yeah. But yeah, so the plan is that Dan's gonna catch the baby and then he'll like cut the cord and like all of that. But
I'll be the first hands to touch him.
Yeah, say, even before me.
And say welcome.
Yeah.
As I think about it more and more, I'm like, I'm excited for that. I really hope that I can be the one.
Yeah.
That I'm strong enough to do it.
But also I would suggest that, so obviously with having like a home and natural birth, it's not, I mean, obviously it's unmedicated because I'm not having an epidural, and you can only really have an epidural in a hospital, but it's not that you don't have any other techniques of like managing pain. And so like being in a tub is great for one. My doula also has like a TENS machine or something, and so like that like helps like vibrate. It's kind of like a little massager for your back. Like that really helps with like soothing your back and your cramps and things like that. And so there are methods in place to help you manage the pain. And another thing I think that really empowered me to like really want to do this natural home birth is understanding that like, yes, birth is painful, but it's not the same as like getting beat up, you know, like there are different types of pain, and this is a type of pain that your body is anticipating happening. It's kind of built to withstand this type of pain.
Sensation.
Yeah, and so like the way that like the books that I've been reading and other people that have been talking about natural birth have framed birth is that they're sensations, you know, your contractions are really strong feelings that are happening to your body, and it's very intense. But if you frame it in your mind that way, then it's going to make it a lot easier for you mentally to not see it and register it as pain and more as a sensation that your body is going through, and something that's really, really intense that requires a lot of your attention. So I think like doing the work to like kind of retrain your brain about birth is a really big part of it, because there's so much fear around birth. Like when you look it up and just in movies in general, like there's so much fear. And I think that fear really does hinder us because it doesn't allow you to really acknowledge something that your body wants to do naturally.
I think that fear probably stops you from being as comfortable as you can as well, which I think is important. You have to be really comfortable and embrace it.
And that's the thing, is that I have no idea what it's... I say that now, and it might be so god-awful that I can't handle it. But, I mean, it's also knowing yourself and knowing, like, what your pain thresholds are. But for me, I'm just the type of person where I want to try to experience the full range of it before saying, like, okay, this is enough. Like, I can't handle this. And so, like, everyone has, like, their different reasons for why they would want an epidural, why they wouldn't. And at the end of the day, like, same with choosing a hospital or home birth. Like, it is whatever is most comfortable for you. You know yourself best. So if you think that you're the type of person that wants to get an epidural, that is totally your prerogative. And, like, it's different for everybody. So, yeah, you really don't know that about yourself until you put yourself in this situation. And you're like, hey, what do I really, really, really want? So the one thing that I am really grateful for, just with having a midwife in general and having the options, is them pushing us to educate ourselves. I think that's the only thing that they really push us to, is like educating yourself on all the options, because we really did learn so much. Like, I didn't realize how little we knew about pregnancy and birth until we actually started researching. And I would advise everybody, like, if you are pregnant, to just do your research on what all of your options are, because it empowers you. It empowers you to be able to feel comfortable. Like, even if I have to have a C-section, then now I can kind of anticipate, like, why that would have to happen, and, like, being okay with it. Whereas if I didn't educate myself, then there would be so much fear surrounding it.
Like, you confusion, know? Probably.
Yeah, and I think it's just so important.
And there's so many, like, articles you can read. There's so many books.
I mean, just try to be aware of, like, any biases that might come up, because whether you're in a hospital or with a midwife, there are obvious biases from both sides. So absorb all the information that you can. Be sure that you're checking geographically where it is published, because that really does matter, especially if you're looking at stats. But I mean, we were gonna do some questions, like some Q&A, but I kind of feel like we've answered everything, and I kind of by talking about it. But the one thing that we didn't address is if you are gonna be scared, and how I would feel about Dayon seeing everything. But genuinely, like, I don't care, because Dayon's seen everything.
We're so comfortable with each other. And I did actually have to prepare myself by watching an actual birthing video.
We watched a couple
YouTube.
Like, actual baby coming out of the vagina videos, because I was like, you need to mentally prepare yourself, because I don't want you fainting when when you see this. And so,
but I'm also very aware that I might faint, because that's just me. I'm like, when I broke my wrist and they showed me the x-ray, I literally fainted, because like, I was like...
But then that's the thing. So then I have my doula who I can depend on for support should Dayon be out.
You know how they say, the bigger you are, the harder you fall. So
yeah. But
my tall ass will just collapse. But no,
I don't think either of us are really that scared.
Yeah, I watched a few of the videos, and like, everyone's like, yeah, you start getting desensitized to it, or like it starts looking normal, so then you're like, yeah, you know what, that's fine.
Well, like, you have to just accept that it's gonna be bloody. It's gonna be bloody, it's gonna be messy, like, my vagina is gonna stretch like you've never seen before, but like, you get to see our bean. I
wouldn't say now that I'm nervous. Like, now I'm actually I think I'm like really excited. I'm excited to meet a baby. Scared. I like saw the process and how much blood there really is and all that stuff. So like, now that I'm aware of it, you know, it'll be straight, it'll be good, and I'm excited. Like, I want to be the one to catch it, clip the umbilical cord, and just lay there with you while our little bean is making those funny faces that they do when they first come out.
And I feel like I'm not scared at all. Like, I think in the very beginning of our pregnancy, I was probably a lot more scared of just the reality of like, oh my God, like, something that large is gonna come out of my vagina, or like, what if I die? Like, there's so many fears surrounding pregnancy, and there are risks involved 110%. But after just being educated about anything that could possibly go wrong, it's like, you have to just let go at a certain point. Like, there's no point in worrying. And also, in the book that I read about natural birth, I learned that if you're really happy, like, oxytocin in your hormones plays a huge role in giving birth. But if you're really happy, and especially if you're laughing,
which is where my comedic side will come out.
If you're laughing and you're having like a really great time, then birth actually goes a lot smoother, because your body can feel tension in different places. And so, like, your body knows when you're not comfortable, and it just locks up. Whereas if you're like really happy and like loose, essentially, then your body is gonna be able to do what it needs to do a lot easier. And so
I got some jokes lined up.
I don't know, I'm just like, I feel like I am excited. I'm really excited, and I don't know, I'm not scared.
We're just waiting. We're just patiently waiting for all of this to happen, and go with the whole flow as it comes. And...
Oh, also, if you guys need a free prenatal class, because now obviously it's like you can't really go outside or congregate with people, our midwife suggested the free YouTube videos by Holiday Tyson. So if you just type in Holiday Tyson prenatal class, she has a 3-part prenatal class on YouTube, and it's very insightful. I mean, a lot of it was stuff we already knew just because of the kind of research that we've been doing. But I would also recommend that you guys take a breastfeeding class. We did that, and we learned so much about breastfeeding.
Yeah. There's so much we didn't know about breastfeeding.
There's just so much you don't know in general about like pregnancy and birth, because like everything that, I mean, like, why would you, you know, like, why would you know all the specifics of it? But there's also just so much misinformation out there. And so, we learned
what I like about a lot of things that we learned, and I think a lot of the choices that we're making, is a lot of it's based on our own natural instinct as like human beings. Because like animals, I mean, they obviously don't have hospitals for giving birth and stuff, and humans need it just because of like, to be evolution.
Fair, that one documentary did mention that humans do need it because humans
need assistance, but like what I'm saying is
because
like,
our heads have developed larger than our pelvises, our brains, and so we do need assistance. But do we need all the technology in a hospital unless you're having complications? No, you really don't. To have a birth, you really don't need all of that. And I'm not talking, like, I just feel like I need to constantly like give like a disclaimer, because I know that people are just so triggered by like risks and stuff, but it's like, I'm not talking about the complications, if they do arise within our pregnancy, then we would one, go to the hospital, and if it was just like, oh, okay, like I need like an epidural, then the midwife would still be the one to deliver our baby. But if it was like a C-section or something like that, then that's when we have a doctor come in and a specialized person that deals with complicated births to assist us. It's not ruling out that it could happen, but it's just saying that like it is so low risk for the type of person that I am and the type of pregnancy that we've had, that a major complication would arise. Like I would foresee that the only reason why we would go to a hospital is because I wouldn't be able to manage the pain. Again, you can't predict any of these things. But like, I just like, based on everything that we've been through with our pregnancy and with our midwife, like it's a very low risk pregnancy.
So yeah, like I said, I'm just happy that we went like the instinctual route and just letting your body run its course the way that your body knows to do. So
I never thought we would be here though. I didn't think we were these type of people
choosing it to do this way. Because I guess the other stigma is that it's like hippy dippy and like an all natural like type of person,
and it's like, but some of that like I do buy into, you know, like with the deep breathing, and like you have to like if you meditate, it honestly it's very helpful for you to go through a natural birth, because you need to be able to tap into this place in your mind and like go somewhere that's like safe for you and like really tap into your body. And I think that if you don't have kind of like the skills to do that beforehand, it's going to be a bit difficult for you, because like you're kind of very much like in the room, whereas you need to be in your body, you know, like you need to be focusing on the sensation.
In tune with yourself.
So like it takes a lot of work, you know, to get there, and like meditation, things like that does help. But I mean, like, those are the things that are like hippy dippy to people, but at the end of the day, like that's what helps. Like you need to be able to focus on your body. You need to be able to like not resist the sensations. That's a big thing that I learned, is like when it happens, when the contractions happen, I think that what makes it really difficult for people is when you're fighting it, because you're like, this is painful, and so your body locks up and like you don't want to be experiencing it, and you want it to like go way faster, but you need to let it wash over you. And it's kind of like an ocean. Like if you imagine like waves like rolling, like that's just constantly what's happening. You need to just let it wash over you and like give into it. And I know that sounds like really hard, and again, I'm not speaking from a place of experience, so like, you know, I might be making a podcast like a month later. This is our first pregnancy, so like I might be making a podcast later and say like, fuck everything I told you earlier, but this is everything that I've learned.
This is from all the data that we've collected.
Well, this is like people's experiences that I've like read about and like talked to, so there's
one thing you forgot to mention though.
What?
That we have someone else at our birthing process.
Oh, X! I don't know how X is gonna be, honestly.
He's gonna be terrified.
I think he's gonna be terrified.
X is our cat, by the way.
And like the fact that he is a boy, I think like he won't have that like motherly instinct. That instinct
where he knows what's going on.
So like I think he's just gonna be very freaked out, but to be fair, like,
he might lay on your chest and start purring, and
he might he might surprise me. But I mean, I'm not concerned with him being like a nuisance or anything like that. And like we've asked our midwives like, oh, like we have a cat, like is that okay? Anything we should be concerned about? And there's like literally no concern about pets.
They said in their experiences too that they found that some like cats and dogs have been very helpful during the laboring process, because they're just like there and they're like present for like companionship, and a cat's purr is extremely relaxing, and Yeah, because what did she say that, I think it was Artie or Dula said that while the girl was in labor, the cat was literally like on her stomach, kind of helping her push. Yeah.
Yeah.
And was
so
like
cute.
really helpful.
But that's a female cat, so
yeah.
will X do that? I highly doubt it. But
it's still nice to like have him there. And,
yeah.
Because the other thing too, where they were like, if you do a hospital birth, you should slowly start bringing things in so the cat is used to the scent and stuff. But this way, he's gonna
see it.
Extremely be exposed to the scent and know exactly where this thing has come from. And
yeah, he will have witnessed it.
He will have witnessed it. He'd be there.
Yeah. Another thing with deciding if you want to have a home birth is that once you tell your midwife, and I'm pretty sure that it's only really an option if you have a midwife. If you have an OB, he's not coming to your house. So keep that in mind too. Like if you do want to have a home birth, then you would want to look into getting a midwife to be your main like pregnancy and birth practitioner. But anyways, once we told them that we wanted to have the home birth, then in my 36-week appointment, they gave me a birthing kit. And so, like, they give you a birthing kit every single time that somebody decides that they want to have a home birth. And it just includes things like these, like, big absorbent pads, essentially. It, like, has, like, just a bunch of random stuff in it that you don't really have to concern yourself with. It just needs to be in your home so that they can, like, kind of set up properly. And then...
Bought a little plastic mattress cover.
Yeah, so like, they told me, like, other things that I had to have on hand. Like, for all of their medical equipment that they're bringing, they'll need, like, obviously a place to plug that in. And so they need, like, an extension cord. They need, like, a flashlight, a mirror, like, should I be, like, in the water? And they need to be able to see. So there's just, like, a couple things like that they'll tell you that you need to get. And you will probably have most of them in your home, which we already had. But we also have to, like, cover our mattress. And that's, like, just assuming that you're going to be... Giving birth on your bed. But even if you're not, like, even when you're laboring and stuff, like, you might be bleeding and things like that. And so we essentially had to get, like, a plastic cover for our mattress. And then you would put that over your mattress and then put your, like, sheets that you don't care about that will probably get bloody and gross on top of that. So those are also things to consider, that if you are having a home birth, then you do need to prep your home in certain ways. And then we have to, like, give them, like, access to our dining table because that's where they're going to set up all their equipment. They also needed to know, like, where to park and, like, things like that. And usually if we weren't in, like, this whole COVID situation, they would have come to our house at 36 or 37 weeks to get a feel for the space. But since we have the situation, then they're not doing that. They're just trusting that, like, everything that I tell them is, like, accurate, that I'm like, yes, you can set up here and, like, we'll have the tub here and, like, all of these things. So there are definitely ways that, like, this whole quarantine and social distancing situation has affected our pregnancy in ways that I didn't really anticipate. And at first, like, it didn't feel like it really changed much because, like, at this time we would be nesting anyways and, like, being in our house. Like, I really can't go outside without peeing. Like, I pee every 30 minutes because, like, the baby is on my bladder. So, like, I can't be out for that long. But a big one is that, like, I was getting prenatal massages every single month, and I was, like, amping it up to being, like, every single week, like, in my last trimester, and those were so nice for, like, my back and just relaxing in general. But obviously can't do that. And then we were also going swimming a lot, which was amazing for, like, exercise and also just, like, us spending time together. And, like, my body feels so light and, like, buoyant in water, like, it's not as heavy. And so we obviously can't do that. Like, that was really hard. So I think it's mostly, like, trying to have, like, a healthy diet during this time as well, because, like, if I wasn't pregnant right now, like, I could eat as much pasta as I wanted and, like, more instant food that would be easier to hoard when you're going to the grocery store, like, once a week.
Yeah,
you know,
but you gotta get more fresh fruits.
Yeah, but, like, that's the thing. Now I need, like, fresh fruits and vegetables, and, like, I need, like, a bunch of protein. So, like, we were buying, like, before this, we were buying, like, a bunch of fish and chicken, and, like, I was just, like, making all those things. But now it's, like, those things go bad so quickly. So, like, I mean, I'm trying to utilize the freezer and all that, but it's just been a little bit more difficult to, like, maintain the diet that I should be having. Because, like, yeah, if I wasn't pregnant, like, it really wouldn't matter what I ate.
Yeah.
But it really does now. And, yeah, just, like, getting exercise in general. So, I mean, they're all, like, very minor. And obviously, like, in this situation, we're very blessed to, like, both be very healthy. And me and the baby are very healthy. No one that we know is really sick or affected by COVID. And so, like, obviously we are very, very blessed and, like, thankful to just be able to be safe during this time.
Yeah. Another way that the quarantine would affect our baby is post-birth, and how it would not be able to, like, meet our friends or like, our family and stuff.
Yeah, my parents are supposed to come up, like, a month after our due date. and meet our grandchild, like their grandchild. And
the tickets are already bought, right?
Yeah, the tickets are already bought. So, like, I mean, if they can't go, then I'm sure it would be pretty easy to, like, reschedule it on the airline side. But it just kind of sucks because it's, like, you know, like, we had an idea of what it would look like when we had our baby, and, like, everyone being happy and, like, together, you know, meeting, and together, and, like, meeting our baby, and, like, that obviously can't happen, which is kind of sad for me because, like, I wanted to be surrounded by our community, and even though, like, everyone can still meet him through FaceTime, like, it's really not the same thing at all. And
or,
I
like,
think that was,
like, a 2-meter distance, like, where you can't actually touch him. But.
So I think, like, that was kind of just, like, for me, like, the biggest disappointment. But at the end of the day, like, I mean, it's like, what can you say? Like, you're making the best of this situation. We're still able to have, like, birth and, like, have options, and, like, but it is gonna be really, really interesting having a child during this time. Like, it's just, I think this is a weird time for everyone, but it's a weird time to have a baby.
It is nice that we prepared for a home birth, though, but there are a lot of people that are like, oh, so what are you gonna do now? Are you gonna do a home birth? And I'm like, well, we're gonna do a home birth regardless, so we
were planning one. So I mean, it's good in general, I just want to avoid the hospital if possible, because, you know, people are going in there sick, so you don't really want to go around those germs if you can, but again, you can't predict what's going to happen, so I'm going to take it in stride. Whatever needs to happen. So that's our birth plan. That's all the reasons why we want to have a home birth. I really feel like I'm missing something, and it's bothering me, but I don't think I did. I mean, we've been rambling for so long.
It's that feeling where you're like, I'm missing something, so I'm going to keep talking.
Yeah, that's
what maybe it'll come
but
to
we
me,
need to just stop. Yeah, we need to just stop
honestly, I think we answered most of all the questions, if not all of them.
Yeah.
And I hope it was helpful for anyone that is pregnant and kind of trying to figure out a birthing plan, or if they have to, like, consider home birth now because of the social situation. But
I hope it just encourages you, no matter what, to just do your research and educate yourself on your options. Like, I can't say that enough times, because like everything, there is no right or wrong answer. It's what's best for you, and the only way that you can make the best informed decision is to educate yourself. And so
research as much as possible and just see.
Yeah, and, like, if it's important to you, like, talk to your birth partner, because, like, for me, it was really important that obviously I was comfortable, but that Dayon was also on board so that he could support me, because if Dayon was really resistant to a home birth, then that's, like, something that we need to talk about, because he's not going to be able to be supportive of me at my birth if he's really uncomfortable with the situation. So at the end of the day, like, it is my decision, and it is my body, and it's my birth, but I mean, Dayon is my partner, so it needs to be something that we're both on board with. And we honestly have had a great time, like, watching all these documentaries together and, like, researching together. And, like, even when we're reading books, I'm like, oh my God, like, did you know? Or, like, we're, like, constantly sharing facts with each other. So it honestly has been really great to, like, do this with somebody. And, like, I'm really grateful for that. But yeah, this is it. That's the end of the podcast. We need to stop it because I'm rambling and I can feel it.
We're ending it.
But as always, I hope that you guys have the most beautiful day. It's honestly getting so nice here in Vancouver. Sunny. So sunny. But you can follow us at Your Girl Neens.
Dayon's Day Off.
And at Neens Deens. And please let us know any thoughts that you guys have. If you do have any questions about home birth, obviously, I mean, I would refer you to Google first. But I would be more than happy to chat with you guys. So feel free to slide in the DMs. And we'll see you guys next time.
Like, comment, subscribe, send to a friend, rate us.
Yeah, we would appreciate all of that. Okay, bye.
Bye-bye. See you next week.